addition of the column Mr. Muhammad Speaks to the Pittsburgh Courier brought an increase in the sales of the newspaper and soon made it a nationally read paper with a circulation exceeding 120,000 newspapers.
Had planted in New York, Hartford, and wherever he went throughout the United States began to germinate. Young people were accepting the teachings, and temples were being organized, and common people were being made great orators. The Muslims bought an old animal hospital at 824 East 43rd Street. They cleaned it up and repaired it and began holding school and temple meetings in it. For 7 years, the enemies and hypocrites chased the messenger as he fled from city to city to avoid the wrath of such a wicked people, but yet always continuing his mission, going from Milwaukee to Washington, Cincinnati, Baltimore, New York, Boston, Springfield, Newark, Providence, Richmond, and Atlanta. He was always teaching salvation for the American so-called Negro.
Brother Jardine.
Yes.
Would you tell us about the times during the early 30s when Messenger Muhammad was running for his life, during the time when they had the enemy and the hypocrites were?
Well, things were going along pretty fair, but pretty rough, and then they got after him and they tried to close out because the children were going to school and they didn't want them to send the children to school. And so they suffered around, and so all of a sudden he had to leave out. And so at the time when he was leaving, he sent for me to come over to take his works on, carried on until he returned. And so at the time that he was going away, they would come and ask me, did I know why he was? And I'd tell him no. And I says, I'm looking for him myself. And so that's the way it went. And so otherwise, time was hard, so we just scuffed him from door to door, trying to keep the temple open and moving on until the things got kind of quiet.
On May 8, 1942, the Friday before Easter, in the home of Mrs. Williams, where Messenger Muhammad was arrested by 2 FBI men. This incident began a new chapter in the courageous struggle of the Muslims, as most of all the male followers were jailed in federal prisons with the messenger, including 2 of his own sons.
Most of the activity for the next 5 years was carried on by the Muslim women, at that time led by the messenger's wife, Sister Clara Muhammad.
Sister Lois,
Yes.
tell us how life was for the Muslim women while their husbands were in prison.
Well, for the children, well, I worked and I cared for them very well. And when my husband returned, they were well taken care of, and I had plenty of food and everything that the household needed.
What were some of the things that took place while your husband was away in the temple?
Well, only the children. I kept my children in school, and I was harassed about the outside school, public school, bringing them in, but with no problems at all, I kept them in the Muslim school and took care of them very well by working.
In December 1955, he and his followers purchased a Jewish synagogue and school at 5335 South Greenwood Avenue, where they continue to set an uplifting standard of education for the black man. Get an education which will benefit their own people and not education adding to the storehouse of their teacher. We need education, but an education which removes us from the shackles of slavery and servitude. Get an education, but not an education which leaves us in an inferior position and without a future.
The University of Islam continues to develop superior students. By turning out students who can read and write at grade level or above, Muhammad's universities of Islam are setting standards for education that are higher than those set by the accreditation boards of the public schools.
He wants all black children taught and trained by their own teachers. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad loves the black man of America and wants all to receive and enjoy freedom, justice, and equality with money, good homes, and friendship, as he has shown all of us who have accepted Islam in North America. In 1962, Illinois State Senator Gottschalk attempted to get the University of Islam School in Chicago closed, describing the religion of Islam as hate teachings. The temple in Harlem, New York is firebombed by enemies. But Mr. Muhammad is determined that Islam will hold fast in New York and orders that the firebombed temple building be purchased and completely renovated into a modern new school and temple of Islam. Reverend Martin Luther King meets with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in February of 1966, and Reverend King agrees with Mr. Muhammad and the principles he is teaching.
At 419 Madison Avenue, which is a structures long ago in the history of Atlantic City, we had what was called the University of Islam and Muhammad's Temple number 10, which was the 10th numbered temple in America. At that time was about 70 numbered temples and about 100 and some temples that didn't have a number. At 419 Madison Avenue, we had what was called the University of Islam, which I was very proud to be the director of. We had students from kindergarten to about 8th grade, and then after that we went to Philadelphia, where we had several students who graduated from the University of Islam. And that was an effort started by Elijah Muhammad and Sister Clara Muhammad to educate youngsters, to try to get them away from an education that sort of enslaved them and didn't give them the proper credentials to be free thinkers, and to give them a spirit of independence and an appreciation of their culture and their heritage. You can see that even today in the homeschool movement, in the charter school movement. Elijah Muhammad and University of Islam was ahead of his time in regards to independent education, in regards to the importance of education, and in regard to making sure that on a local grassroots level that people control their institutions. In the Black Power movement, after the University of Islam had really got started, there was an effort called community control of schools. The Nation of Islam was doing that in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, and the 70s, actually supporting, controlling, financing, and setting up curriculums for an independent school system. We euphemistically called it a university system. Obviously, it wasn't in terms of the criteria educationally, in terms of the equipment, but in terms of the importance that we stressed for education, it was. Locally, we had strong connections with the school system. We had books and educational materials that we received from the school system, and of course we had religious and moral education that we implemented. And as I said, this is a precursor to the homeschool movement and the charter school movement that has really swept the country. And as we look for some of the solutions to the education malaise that we find in public schools, some of the lessons that we learned in the University of Islam can be applied. And those lessons are respect, discipline, importance of knowledge, spiritual development, a moral base in the teachers and the students and the administrators. If we do that and bring those theories and concepts and philosophies instituted by Elijah Muhammad and Sister Clara Muhammad, we can improve the public and the charter schools today.